Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this session. It is entitled, apparently, European Thinking Through European Cultural Patrimony. Having known Richard DeMarco for some years, I can tell you the one thing that he won't do is stick to the title of the presentation this afternoon. You have seen in the conference programme background to Richard and his many, many years involved in the European cultural scene. For those of you who were present at the session this morning on Room 13 International, I talked about 5 things that made Room 13 unique. There are 5 things that make Richard DeMarco unique. First of all, he has attended every Edinburgh Festival since its inception. Secondly, he turned the festival into a place for contemporary art and introduced the idea that the visual art language is as important and serious as music, dance, and theatre. Thirdly, Richard is unique in that he crossed the Iron Curtain more than 60 times during the Cold War, and his actions in so doing created an unequaled cultural legacy across Europe. Fourthly, he has created the DeMarco Archive, and I think some of you have got copies of this. And if I was to read the summary of the honours bestowed on Richard, which is in here on the yellow page, then we would still be here when it's time for a well-deserved drink at the end of the day's proceedings. I won't do that, but through the archive, Richard DeMarco has created, through friendship and collaboration, a unique archive, which is an academic resource. And fifthly, as a teacher, and always as a teacher, Richard has continued to insist that the work of an artist is identified with teaching through the arts. He is a continuing champion of the theory and practice of Joseph Beuys and those inspired by it. So if I was to sum up one word to encapsulate Richard DeMarco, it must be teacher. And I'll stop there because if I was to go on, we would be here all afternoon. Allow me, please, with that introduction, to introduce Professor Richard DeMarco.
Thank you. Well, I have hardly recovered from the earlier session, which I found inspiring. I realized I was speaking to friends and people sharing my hopes and aspirations for the future of the human race. I want you to know that I have acquired a reputation as a patron of the arts. And for 32 years, I was responsible for the official Edinburgh Festival program involving not artists who were dead, but artists who were alive. The Edinburgh Festival was founded in 1947, 2 years after the ending of the tragedy of the Second World War. That was a miracle, because Edinburgh had no reputation for defending cultural ideas. But in the 18th century and in the early 19th century, it became known as the City of Enlightenment, when it created the ideas of the modern world. Modern medicine, modern engineering, modern politics, modern economics. You have it all happening in Edinburgh. But the one thing that was not happening in Edinburgh was the development of ideas through the language of the visual arts. Yeah. And those who don't have this documentation I'm giving out should find that when this event is over, you will have my address and you will have a kind of resume of what I've tried to do since 1947. Now, I don't expect anyone in this room to have been an adult in 1947. I was, yes, an adult. I was 17 years of age. And I was born of Italian-Irish blood in Scotland. The third generation of Italian immigrants. The Italians, the peasants who lived in Italy and lived a very hard life as farmers and as shepherds in the Apennine Mountains, were given the chance to leave Italy by the Risorgimento of Garibaldi. Many of them made the mistake of going to New York to become American. And all of these Italians are first and foremost Americans. They lost their identity as Italians, European Italians. Those that went to Scotland, the land of the Celts, that part of Europe identified with the world of Bilbao, because we are in a sea girt on a coastline of the Atlantic, not the Mediterranean. And this coastline was used for 2,000 years to create trade with the islands we call Great Britain. Great Britain. The United Kingdom. Well, we're in an age when the Scots people have decided that maybe they should destroy the United Kingdom. And they represent a large land mass of Scotland, especially the mountainous north, which is the size of Belgium. And they have decided that they should emphasize the importance of Celtic culture. Now that leads you to the culture of this part of Spain. It also leads you to the culture of the people who call themselves Catalan. And to understand Europe well, I think you have to understand that at one time, this part of Europe was part of an empire. It was called the Roman Empire. And the final frontier of the Roman Empire wasn't on the coastline of Bilbao, it was on the coastline of the Celts. And in fact, it was the final frontier of Europe. The Romans weren't very successful in establishing Roman Mediterranean culture in that part of the world because they had difficulty in understanding the mindset of the Celts. And so I am fascinated by this history because my maternal great-grandmother was an Irish woman from Dublin, the world of James Joyce. Her name was McGuinness. So my blood is not Scottish, but it's Celtic, because it is Celto-Romano. That's my cultural heritage. But I live in Scotland. And I live in a city which by its very architecture is perhaps the most European city in the British Isles. It looks like Prague. It's built on hills. It has a castle, a medieval castle. And at one time, the kings and queens of Scotland, in their courtly world, spoke French, because there was a special relationship between Scotland and France, not Scotland and England. Now, I find that I am now living, as you are, in a world where there's a certain degree of unification. I say a certain degree because the politicians are imagining that you can unify Europe from Greece, Spain, Italy, the Mediterranean, to the northern parts of Europe, Germany, France, etc., through something called the euro. And the poor Greeks don't understand the euro as well as the Germans. So you have, as we speak, a tragedy happening. Because you cannot have Europe without the world of Greece. If you imagine you can speak about Europe in terms only of the euro and leave out the world of Aristotle, you can't do it. So I don't know what the rules are for creating this crazy world defined by post-war politics. But I do believe the unifying language is the language at one time identified with the Edinburgh Festival. I say at one time. Because 1947 was 69 years ago. And next year, the Edinburgh Festival will be at the point of retiring. I think it should maybe stop because it will be 70. And we all know that's how long you expect anything to exist, especially human beings. The Bible tells you that you are on this planet for 70 years and 10. Then afterwards, well, maybe you are not able to deal with the business of life. Now, I speak to you, as I pointed out this morning, as someone who has managed to survive the history of the Edinburgh Festival since 1947. But I've also survived the war. It wasn't a good idea to be an Italian in Britain during the war, because Italy was the despised enemy. And how can I explain it? You could not conceive of living in Edinburgh feeling part of the life of Rome. Okay? And Rome, as you know, is the eternal city. It doesn't represent a success story in terms of the euro, but it represents something else. I think it represents the history not of Europe, but of another empire, not just the Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire of Charlemagne. It also represents what used to be defined as Christendom. And Christendom gave the world the concept of the university and the library. It also gave the world the idea of the festival. The festival is normally associated with the separation between the time of Lent and the time of Easter within a Christian calendar. Now we have to think of what a festival can mean, and with it the idea of Christendom. Spain is now very famous because it attracts people from all over the world to this coast, and they become pilgrims honoring the idea of Compostela, the field of stars, and the world of St. James. Edinburgh has become a place of pilgrimage, nothing to do with what I think is the language of the arts. It has become identified with what I call the world of entertainment. So I have seen the world that I am identified with change, to my sadness. And so, to preserve my sanity, about 35 years ago, I changed my program from being simply part of the world of the Guggenheim Museum of Bilbao, the most famous Guggenheim in the world. And I changed it so that it would be about a classroom. But that classroom wouldn't be identified with the world of the Guggenheim in New York, or the Guggenheim in Venice, or the empire of the Guggenheim. I think there's going to be one in Dubai. Can you imagine how stupid that is? How pathetic. The family Guggenheim must be rolling around in their graves to think this is going to be the future. It's not enough to have a museum dedicated to what you call contemporary art. It must be identified with the proper use of the language of the arts in education. So the reason why my friend and colleague is here, he is the patron of a very extraordinary experiment in both art and education. So I finally find myself with something I can believe in. I have presented over 3,000 art exhibitions. Oh, that's too many. 3,000. So I know what it's like to be the director of the Guggenheim. I've also presented 3,000 theatre productions. Can you imagine how stupid I've been? And I have also, thankfully, to give me some kind of hope, I have created an experimental school. And I have based it on the greatest university of the arts ever created in Europe. Can you tell me what that is? Where dance, music, visual art, everything was brought together. I'm talking about, what is it called? Yes, the Bauhaus. But the Bauhaus was destroyed by the madness of the world of Nazi Germany. But it was born again by some of the survivors of the Bauhaus in a place called Black Mountain College in the mountainous area of North Carolina. And I observed that there was no such spirit of education in existence in the English-speaking world. So I transformed my contributions to the Edinburgh Festival into something to do with education. And the result has been that inadvertently, that is by accident, I have created a something called an archive. Information is in here, but it's not an archive to do with Scotland. It's an archive to do with European culture, because I was inspired and helped with this decision in the 1970s because of the work I did as, eventually, the work I did as professor of European cultural studies. And I found myself feeling that I had a mission to educate all the university and academy students in America in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. Because they spoke English, and English is the lingua franca of the world. It is the lingua franca, unfortunately, of the world of computers. It's the lingua franca of the world of culture, lingua franca of the world of publishing. And I realized that I had to educate these young Americans into a world where there was a continent which was not completely English-speaking. There was a continent where people spoke Spanish, French, German, Lithuanian, Polish, Macedonian, my God. And therefore, my idea of introducing the dimension of education became the reason for me being able to invite some of the world's greatest thinkers, philosophers, composers, musicians, sculptors, painters, poets to Edinburgh. And I worked with the ministries of culture of Europe. And I also worked with the British government through something called the British Council. So my idea of the Edinburgh Festival is really about a place of education, linked to the concept of Edinburgh as the city of enlightenment. You know that phrase, the city of enlightenment? It was the city where the concept of modernism was born. And I feel that this city, this extraordinary city of Bilbao, represents a city in Europe which has transformed itself through cultural activities and manifestations, and linking the language of the arts with the language of business. And you have transformed this city, which I remember as a rather sad place, full of post-industrial, man-made cityscapes. And you have made it into, for my money, the most beautiful city, modern city in Europe. I've come here knowing I'm not in let me think, London. I'm not in Paris. I'm not in the kind of European cities which are focal points where people go. If they come from America or from anywhere, they are attracted. This is a city which everyone should come to and take seriously. And so, very briefly, I'll show you some images which prove that I have managed, by the grace of God, to identify my work with the Edinburgh Festival, with the world of education. But I must point out that that world of education is not limited to the world of adult culture. There's one slide there that you will see is dominant because it asks a big question. A child aged 8 holds up a question, which is, how old must you be to become an artist? I could ask that question of each of you because I hope I'm not speaking to anybody here who's not an artist. You're either an artist, a creative human being, or you are a danger to yourself and a danger to society. Because you could end up being a non-creative lawyer, a non-creative politician, and a non-creative banker. You could be someone who actually believes completely in the euro. I don't. I think, because you know, one of the founders of the European Union, a Frenchman, a French politician, 10 years after the founding of the European Union, Monnet said, I think it was a mistake. My idea was to unify Europe through the world of steel and coal. I think it would have been better to unify Europe through the world of culture. He was one of the fathers of the modern Europe. So these slides begin with a definition of what is art. And I'd like you to look at the fifth line, which says, art teaches nothing except the significance of life. And then the next one, art remains the one way possible of speaking truth, and that's one is by Henry Miller, and the other's by Robert Browning. And look at the one which says, all art is a revolt against man's fate, by André Malraux. And I love the last one. Life is short, vita brevis, and art is long. It's the one language which will last beyond your lifetime. So if you want to communicate with future generations, use the language of art. If you want to communicate with the world of politics, then you will communicate with something lasting for the next 10 minutes or 10 months or something. So these slides, if we pass on, art is a language you have to take very seriously. And here it tells you that this is an essay I wrote, and I'd like to send it to you if you give me your address, of my Roman Celtic cultural heritage, which is all about this world here, this part of Europe. The Basque cultural identity. Next. And you have here some of the things I presented. And one of the images is of myself in dialogue with a man called Joseph Beuys. And Joseph Beuys was famously one of the founders of the Green Party in Germany after the war. So he would have been very happy to speak to Pope Francis about why Francis chose his present encyclical to be about global warming. But Joseph Beuys also was a survivor of the war. He fought for 5 years wearing a German Wehrmacht uniform. Next. And this is what happens to a city which believes in the language of art. It can be divided, it can be defined as a city of 1,000 worlds. And it's dominated by a castle. Can you see the castle? And by the dome of a great university, the University of the Enlightenment. Edinburgh University, the first modern university of the world, where modern medicine was evolved. The first time that surgery and medicine as we know it came into being. My goodness me, what a city. It's really got something. It's got 7 hills. And it's got this reputation. The other thing you see here is the spire of Saint-Gilles. St. Giles, they say in English. St. Giles is a Celtic French saint. So you have, even in the stones of Edinburgh, you have the history of Europe. Next. The Edinburgh Festival came into being. And I'm showing you a review of the first 10 years, 1947, 1956. But I'd like you to know that the Nazi German world had caused the last ghetto to be still in existence in 1944. Can you imagine? The Edinburgh Festival was born at the time of a Europe with ghettos and the world of Auschwitz. So it's a crazy idea that there should be art when food was rationed, when the whole of Europe was about people as refugees, when Spain was suffering from a dictatorship. So think about that. So next, you have the Edinburgh Festival defined by Jean Cocteau. So this proves that it is an international festival. It's not a Scottish or British artist. It is a French artist. So the Edinburgh Festival, international festival, is the most unlikely thing to ever happen in the post-war period of Europe. A period of suffering still, of grayness. Can you imagine what Bilbao looked like then? Now the next one shows you that the castle can be floodlit. And here is the center of the city. And here is something I did, to my amazement, under the patronage of the festival. I became part of the 400th anniversary celebration of the life of Shakespeare. That's my image of one of Shakespeare's plays. So it helped me as a human being. I didn't ever expect that I would be with the Europe's great artists, including the grandson of Victor Hugo, and all sorts of people celebrating Shakespeare. Well, of course, we all know that Shakespeare is one of the greatest human beings ever, but he is an internationalist, because most of his plays are not set in the British Isles. They're set in Europe. The Merchant of Venice. He didn't know that Bilbao existed, so there was no play which celebrates the reality of Bilbao. It's a shame, isn't it? Tragedy for Bilbao. I would like to say that we must identify Bilbao with Shakespeare. How do we do it? That's my job. Because maybe next year, the 70th birthday of the Edinburgh Festival, we should have a Shakespeare production in Spanish, well, with the accent of this area, telling us the story of Romeo and Juliet or Hamlet or whatever. I think this would be a good idea. Do you agree? I hope so. What do you do after ECOT? Do you have another ECOT conference where people talk but nothing really happens? In the sense, you don't have a historic moment. And everything is about a historic moment. And I have to find something which is more important to do with the history of the last 15 years in Bilbao. And of course, everybody in the world thinks immediately of the Guggenheim Museum. But I would like to think there's more to Bilbao than that. I've just seen a building 10 times more important. And it's dedicated to the mayor of this city, who was a great artist and patron of all the arts. And he transformed this city and organized the world of big business to support the arts. Next. And here you've got the statement by the mayor, the equivalent in Edinburgh, and he's saying, history alone will determine the wisdom or folly of our efforts to create a festival. Whatever the verdict may be, it cannot be other than colored by the genuineness of purpose of those who have so far planned and guided the destinies of the Edinburgh Festival. My God, I can't believe this. My God, I can't believe the miracle of this city. This is not Belfast, which is not known for its architecture. It's not Birmingham, Manchester, Glasgow. It's something else. Next. And here is the first time in my life that I heard the French language, not English. It was the National Theatre of France, the Comédie Française. I was 17 and I'd never heard French spoken. My French teacher couldn't speak French. Big problem for me. And so I remember that, 1947. The Comédie Française in Edinburgh. And so they had to take all the school children to see it, to fill the theatre. And there were one or two like me. Oh, thank you. Thank you for giving me another language, which is not English. Next. And here you have another image of the festival. You have the Glyndebourne Opera. Now you have a magnificent opera house. So there's no excuse for this city not becoming the Spanish version of Edinburgh. That's my message to you. I don't want to bore you with the thought that the Edinburgh Festival every year brings into the coffers of Edinburgh £170 million. That's not the reason why I think it's important, but it's a thought, isn't it? What's going on here that they don't have a festival equal to Edinburgh? Next. And so, there's no point in me explaining. Next. This is the festival. Here are the people. The greatest, Le Ballet des Champs-Élysées. Oh my God. I couldn't believe what I was actually getting as a gift. I was being educated through the language of the arts of the highest level that no child in any other city could have as a gift. Why was I chosen? I didn't expect it. I was getting the proof that the language of art is the one language that can make you live with enthusiasm until you're at least 85. Oh my God, am I 85? Yes, in a few days' time, I will have to celebrate my 85th birthday. So when you're 85, most people are playing golf, or they're retired, or they're doing something stupid. They're not important. And here, I'm thinking, how do I use this experience and share it with all of you? Next. So, why is the DEMARCO archive a European archive, an academic resource? Is it going to be of value to the University of Bilbao? Is it going to be a resource for the children in the primary schools here? Is it limited, as I've just discovered, to the world of Europe's #1 museum of art, which is the Pompidou? They have millions more people going there than Bilbao, because nobody knows where Bilbao is, really. But they know where Paris is. So, I asked the question, where do I place this? Well, it will have to be in Edinburgh, but it should also be in a satellite form in, for example, cities like Bilbao. Next. Oh, by the way, oh yes, these are great artists. And these are statements. You'll see it if you read what I've given you. Next. I know that the archive is not an archive, not something you put away into boxes. It is a Gesamtkunstwerk. What is that word, which is German? One word. What is the Spanish equivalent? Gesamtkunstwerk. What is it in Spanish? Can someone tell me? A total art work on a gigantic scale, using every single year of your life and involving you in collaboration with heaven knows how many people. Next. Oh my God. There are the list of honors you can get to confuse people. It might even confuse me. I don't believe I'm all these people. I don't believe I've got so many hats. I don't know what I'm doing with the CBE, the commander of the British Empire, when I know there's no British Empire left. Can you imagine the Queen giving me this medal, saying I'm a commander of the British Empire? When I look at her, I shake her hand, I look at her and I think, but where is the empire? It's gone. You have to develop a sense of the ridiculous in this life, or you become bonkers, okay? I'm speaking to every one of you as an artist. I don't want to speak to you as some idiot who doesn't believe that they're an artist. because you become an idiot if you don't use that language. I can tell them either way. By looking into their eyes, there's so many people who are heavily disguised as bankers or educators or politicians. Oh my God. Next. Oh, by the way, that is Romania. This is France. This is Hungary. This is Poland. These are the children, the primary school children of Sarajevo that I brought to Edinburgh. And 2 weeks before, a bomb exploded, a shell exploded, killing over 100 of their fellow children in the siege of Sarajevo. Why do I care about that? Naturally I care. How can I help the children to heal the wounds they suffered? So these images should be studied. You won't find them anywhere else. Next. Oh, well, what is the DEMARCO archive? My God, I can hardly begin to tell you. It's a work of art, a collaborative work of art involving every country in Europe, including Spain, because I began my life working with the artists of Barcelona. Where's Barcelona? Is it in Spain? A lot of people will say no. It's in somewhere where the Catalans gather. Eh? Next. And here is the world I represent. This is a portrait of myself, representing the language I use as a tornado, destroying all stupid ideas and creating a new energy. That's what tornadoes do. The force of nature. My God, I thank that artist, a Romanian artist, for making that drawing. Can I use that image to define you? Next. And here is a map of Scotland showing all the people I brought to Scotland, many of them involved in the circumnavigation of the coastline of Scotland, following in the footsteps of Saint Columba, the great saint who Christianized Europe. Europe was Christianized from a little island in the Hebrides. Can you believe that? If you don't know that, then you're up a gum tree. Right? The great University of the Sorbonne was created from the missionaries sailing up the Seine. And what with the idea that every decent university has to have a decent library, you then become very conscious that a library is important. Next. Oh my goodness me. Here are all the flags of Europe, including the Spanish flag, and a portrait of myself. And here, this is in the National Portrait Gallery of Scotland. I can see that when I die, there will probably be people who will take me seriously. But now that I'm going to be 85, I am taking myself very seriously, because there's no guarantee you're going to live for another 2 days. Right? And you don't have a 5-year plan. Most people I know have 5-year plans to do something stupid. Next. And I know that education, as we have it, is a means, it's created in such a way that it is not about creative thinking. It's about exams. And everybody is given a mark. Oh my God. Can you imagine that our whole life is defined by whether we pass or fail an exam? Next, oh my God, this is too much. This is the world of Germany. I love Germans because no country deserved the stupidity of Hitler. Next. Oh my God. That's Australia up there. And here's my archive as it really is, too big to be in one place. This is the avant-garde of Poland during the Cold War. Next. Oh my God, this is the coming together here of the world of art and the world of nuclear energy at CERN. I'm working with 8 Nobel Prize winners who are working that great machine to try and recreate the Big Bang. Oh my God, they're only Nobel Prize winners. They're not great artists. But we must have a dialogue between the two. Next. And here is more evidence of the work I did. This is a piece of music I commissioned from Harrison Birtwistle, one of the great composers. I shouldn't be speaking to you in this way, in this room, for 5 minutes. We can't go on meeting like this. It's ridiculous. Okay? Next. And here is the evidence. That's my gallery, completely identified with Auschwitz. Okay? This is the world of Tadeusz Kantor. And UNESCO has defined this year, did you know that, as a Tadeusz Kantor year. Do you know about Tadeusz Kantor and his Greco Theatre? Do you? If you don't, then your educational systems that you're using are breaking down. He was one of the greatest. He rethought the meaning of theatre in the 20th century. Celebrated in Poland, Germany, France, Argentina, Israel. Oh, by the way, this is an image of 007, James Bond. By the way, before you go, you two chaps, because I know how important you are, you've got to give me your address. You're not allowed to get out of here just like that. My time is probably up, okay. But anyway, it doesn't really matter.
Ricky, I'm still called Ricky.
Oh, my God.
Last time I saw you was in 1965.
Oh, for God almighty.
At the Travis, I was 18.
I'm lecturing at the university, no, at the school called Winchester School.
Oh, yeah?
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
on the subject of Cantor and
Oh,
room
I should come and see
13.
you.
Oh, my God. And you are...
Richard Gerfer.
And you're the guy that believes education is a bad idea.
Yeah, well, that's putting it simply, I suppose.
Now, I need your card and all your
There you go.
addresses.
There's my card. There you go. Put it in there. Sorry, excuse us.
They're so busy, but can I just say something? Next, Terry.
I'm going to finish, Richard.
Yeah, this is when... Oh, where's the second card? My God, all these years have passed.
I'll see you later and remind you of when we met.
Oh, my
I'm gonna give
God.
you one word to jog your memory.
Yeah.
Twink.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God, you've just shaken me to my... Oh, by the way. This is my gallery under full sail in the image of HMS Beagle, the world of Darwin. Why not? Why don't you associate the world of contemporary art with Darwin? Because he was one of the greatest artists who ever lived. He gave us a different time. Okay? And I must finish in a minute, but next. Oh my God. That's next. You must, okay, about 2 seconds, just give me an image of that 9/11. Give it to me.
We've lost the technician, Richard. It's on a different...
Right, okay, can I just say something? My friend here represents, he's a patron of room 13. I want room 13 to be all over Spain, not just in one school in Bilbao. Room 13 is my hope for the future. And I need you to know about Room 13. And I'll tell you what Room 13 is about. It answers the question, how old were you when you became an artist? Right. I think you become an artist when you're born. And until you end your days as a primary school child, you're an artist. You jump, you sing, you draw, you paint. That's the way all children are. And then something goes wrong at the secondary school level, and you become part of the world of exams, okay? And you're judged according to the way you use the spoken or written word. The #1 language of the world is visual language. The Chinese know that. You know it. So I'm saying, if you have young people using visual language, you probably have a good idea. Now, I'm going to say we have to vacate this room. It's a great pity, but I need your names and addresses. And I can't, there's not time in the room, but there's time for you to give me these so that you can be in dialogue with me, okay? And tell me who you are, why you're here, and why you should spend your time in this world of the Edinburgh Festival and in the world of the DEMARCO archive. This is the most important archive in existence.
Ah, lovely.
Oh, you got it.
Just whilst the technician's doing that, on the cards that have been circulated, you have Richard's email address, richard@richarddemarco.org. His invitation to you is to communicate with him, and if you use that, then that will be an easy way of communicating and setting up the dialogue to which he's referred and which he's anxious to encourage. So richard@richarddemarco.org.
Just a minute. Look, what age can you start being an artist? Is it too late? And now, one last thing. This should be the next image. Look, that is painted. It's now celebrated in the Tate Gallery, and it's painted by a wonderful artist, aged 11. And she wanted to paint, show the image again. Ah, that's her again. And that's her as a victim of 9/11. She's showing herself as one of the dead people in a shroud, surrounded by debris from... and I believe these children have become great artists at primary school level. And this says creativity is capital. And it proves that these people are inspired by Joseph Beuys. And here they are in the Scottish Parliament, in dialogue with parliamentarians, telling them, why are you not all artists? Why are you content to be politicians? It's a stupid idea. You're wasting your life. So they're telling their story. There they are in room 13. My job is to encourage you to come to an extension of ICOT, which I will have in Scotland, where I will take you to the room which began the whole experiment 21 years ago. And you see the children, you see how important they are, and you see them working. They're given a chance that's not given to children of their age in every school you can think of in Spain. It's ridiculous. So tomorrow, I want to talk to the Minister of Education, the Minister responsible for the future of Spain, and especially the future of this part of Spain, and find out why there's only one room 13 in Bilbao. Only one. Hands up anyone who's interested in establishing a room 13 in there. Hands up. Where would that be? Where? Ah. Yeah. Anyway, I need you to think about this. It's not enough for you to sit here and listen to me. I'm asking you to respond. Have you got one of these? Yeah. I'm asking you to respond by taking action. And thank you very much for being here.